Good afternoon. So, you have to you have to have 3 to 5 lesson plans for your learning segment. And there are some rules about them. And so after we have you write the lesson plans, we have to have you modify them so they'll work for the edTPA submission. So this is about modifying your lesson plans for the edTPA submission. You get a maximum of 4 pages per lesson plan. And you need to make sure that you don't eliminate anything important or significant. So this presentation is going to give some suggestions. It's also going to give some things that you must do, and it's going to give some things that you should not do when you're shortening your lesson plans. Okay. Um, on about page 9 of your textbook, I'm sorry, your handbook. I'm trying to find my mouse. There it is. I hate when it does that. It disappears. So on about page 9 of your handbook, there is a list of things that the edTPA expects to see you put in the lesson plans. So you can turn to that. But basically, these are the directions. You want to write a lesson plan for each lesson in the segment. They should be detailed enough that a substitute or another teacher could understand them well enough to use them. Um, it needs to include this information: your state adopted student academic content standards. Now, you want to make sure that you're using the standards that your teacher is using. So don't be worried if it's not exactly state adopted, but if, for instance, if you're using standards from an AP class or something like that, they have to be state adopted standards. Just that sometimes states adopt standards that don't say Tennessee on them, is what I'm trying to say. Um, so these are the target for the student learning. You want to include the number and the text of the standard. So all the standards have a number, but that's not enough. You've got to put the number and you've got to write out all the words. Make sure you have learning objectives. You want to make sure that you list informal and formal assessments. So that means you're going to have to make a change on our lesson plan um, from summative and formative to informal and formal. Um, so you want to also include instructional strategies, learning tasks, what you and your students will be doing. You want to make sure you have the supports that students need, and the instructional materials and the resources. Each lesson can be no more than 4 pages in length, and you have to condense all of them onto one file. So you're going to copy and paste them all onto one Word document file, and you want no more than 4 for each lesson. Now you can't, like if one lesson is 5 pages and another is 3, it doesn't work that way. 4 and 4 are always the maximum. Okay, so you want to remove any identifying information in any extra lines. So when you go to look at your lesson plan template, take off all that stuff that's at the top that identifies it as, a data point and all that. None of that's necessary, and just really kind of gets in the way. You also want to remove anything that has your name on it or says ETSU or your school or anything like that. What you do need to have is something that says lesson plan 1, and maybe a title for the lesson. But the important thing is to put lesson plan 1 so that when you're writing about lesson plan 1 in your commentary, the scorer will be able to go and turn. So if you on that file, if you say that you in your commentary, if you write, you say, okay, you need to look at lesson plan 3, then the scorer will open up your lesson plan file and she'll scroll down until she sees your title, lesson plan 3. One way that you can save space is to remove unnecessary blank lines. Now, when you turn this in for your supervisor, this looks pretty good to separate like this, but it's not really necessary for what you're doing. You could maybe underline these or bold these like has been done here, and that makes it stand out without using blank lines. So there's some spaces that you can remove there. You want to remove any unnecessary instructions or guidance. So anything on there, any kind of instructions from ETSU, all that, awful looking italics that's on there, take that out of there. Just go ahead, delete, delete, delete. It's not necessary for the scorer to be able to see what ETSU's directions were. And again, remove any kind of extra lines or spaces that appear in the box. It might be a little harder to do because of the formatting of the form. Sometimes you can, grab it and pull up a line, but just see what you can do with that. So you also want to make sure that you don't use more words than you have to. So rewrite for brevity, even if you lose a little bit of details, but don't go too brief unless you have to. So here's an example where we've used here 101 words, and here 60. This is 553 characters versus 318. 3 sentences versus 6. Some detail was lost, and you could always add that back if it became really important. So use all of the strategies together to cut down sections. So here's an example of that. Here we've deleted lines. We can delete lines. We can use bold for formatting and trim down the statements. We can edit long sections of text. Now, here I'm showing you this because some information is so important you don't want to remove it. It is extremely important for your edTPA that you show that you're following IEPs and 504s and that you're doing things to meet the needs of differing learners. So don't remove anything that's really critical like that. But you can remove a lot of unnecessary stuff. You can delete the blah, blah, blah. You can edit text, reformat, close up spaces. Now, you must remove all rationale. That is not actually an option. Well, no one's going to score it against you, but they say in the directions to remove all the rationale. So anytime you say, I'm doing this because, that is something that needs to be in your commentary. So if you want to cut it out and then paste it onto another document, that's fine. But you don't want it to be in your lesson plan. All that's going to be addressed in planning commentary prompt 3A and 3B. So if you find out that your planning commentary turns out to be too long, we can work on shortening it. But you need to remove your rationale from the lesson plans. That's a must do. You want to consider moving some content to your instructional materials. You could do that. Like, for instance, let's say that you had a big long list of vocabulary. Well, you could actually maybe take that vocabulary list and put it into your instructional materials and just have it there. You don't have to put every single word that you're using. Remember, keep vocabulary to a minimum. The vocabulary that you use should be the the terms or symbols that are important to this lesson, using this language function and using this discourse or syntax. What is important? List the vocabulary with commas instead of doing it line by line. Again, here's an example where someone might want to consider moving content to the 5 pages of instructional materials that you get. So here I would suggest reducing the content maybe to an outline. This person has given a whole bunch of details about their PowerPoint, just written out more or less what they're going to say. And instead of doing that, they could just give an outline for their PowerPoint. And so all of the content that's on the PowerPoint does not have to be in the lesson. Some of the things that you're saying, for instance, you could maybe put that in more of a brief description about what you're doing for struggling learners. So you can also go through and think about what you need and must and you don't need. So when it gets down to it, if you're still trying to figure out what to cut out of your lesson plan, you are supposed to include materials and instructional resources, but you could shorten or reformat the list and cut out unnecessary lines. You could do that. Or you could maybe put it in your instructional resources and materials in your list. If you're co-teaching, you do not need to include any information about co-teaching in your lesson plan. So, what is essential is what you need to be thinking about. What is essential for an outsider to know about your lesson? So, try to think about what's essential, what is not. Safety information would be something very important. For example, if you were doing a science activity or a PE activity, or sometimes even art, depending on what kinds of materials you're using. But it generally, putting down general safety issues is not something that needs to be in your lesson plans. Things like move book bags so you don't trip over them. These are things that don't need to be in lesson plan. But if you were planning a lab, you might want to include something in there about it. You want to move all references to the end of your planning commentary. So if you have references that you've used for your lesson plans, cut those out and then keep them for later, because you can put them at the end of your planning commentary, and it does not count into your page count. So, do you have any questions? If you have questions, you can always ask them on our Facebook group, or you can email me, or you can send me a text. Even if you're in the middle of something and you need a quick answer, my number is 423-646-2113. And so you're always welcome to text me. Please introduce yourself when you do, and then I can save your name as a trusted contact. And then I'll even accept phone calls once I know who it is that's calling me. So I hope that you have a good day. I do want you to, as you submit these lesson plans, to submit them in the one file. So they're just going to be one file that all 4 or 3, 4, or 5 lesson plans are going to be on. So there would be there could be anywhere from 12 pages to 20 pages, depending on the length of your lesson plan. And if your lesson plans are really short, then, I guess there could possibly be even 6 pages, although I wouldn't think that would be very good to have that short of lesson plan. I wouldn't reduce the font too much until, you can reduce the font on your lesson plans. They don't have to be an 11 font, but I would do that last, as a last resort, because you don't want things to be difficult to read for your scores. Okay, well, you have a good day, and I will see you again soon.